Gukaishin became serious and asked the father to mind his words. The father extended his hand to one side, and with a smile explained that although Jiang would not marry his daughter, it would be good to establish a relationship as in-laws. Jai Xuanyu's gaze fixed on her father, and she couldn't help but drop her jaw and turn red like a tomato. She didn't know what her father was trying to achieve with this. She got angry, moved away from her father, and with an enraged expression asked if he was trying to force her into marriage, explaining that she did not agree. If the father wanted someone to get married, then he could marry Jiang. The father remained calm, and with a tranquil smile explained that feelings could be cultivated. Young people were not very into the idea of getting married first and falling in love later. Jai Xuanyu did not change her mind. She turned her back on the father and began heading toward the door. She was so furious that she no longer wanted to continue talking to him. The father's eyes filled with confusion and concern. He reached out his hand toward his daughter and tried to stop her. He turned around towards Jiang and the others, and his gaze filled with joy. With a confident smile, he asked our boy to stay at his house for a couple of days to see if he could make his daughter fall in love with him, and if things didn't work out, then he could leave. This proposal was somewhat tempting, but Jiang knew that this old man was plotting something. With a forced smile, he accepted since, after all, there was no way Jai Xuanyu would fall in love with him. So staying here for a few days wouldn't do any harm. Besides, this way he could earn the king's trust and obtain the divine and demonic blood. Once night fell, Gukaishin and Duan left the Jai family mansion. Not long after that, the father kept his promise and handed our boy a box full of red bottles containing divine and demonic blood. This blood had immense power. By consuming it, it could grant an ordinary person a cultivation level equivalent to that of a king in an instant. But like everything, it had a price, and in this case, it was the explosion of the body and the total annihilation of the soul. When the father handed over the blood to our boy, he explained that it contained a terrifying will and asked him to be very careful. In response, he thanked him with a smile. Jiang began observing the bottles of blood and couldn't help but smile, giving Xiao Jai the order to manifest. Not long after, Xiao Jai, who was somewhat sad, appeared and lowered his head before Jiang as a form of greeting, and his body began to emit a powerful red energy. Seeing this, Jiang was somewhat confused and asked the boy why he was so downcast. With a depressed expression, he explained that little Nine didn't like him and she wanted to kick him out of the insect nest. Jiang extended his hand toward him and with a forced smile tried to console him by asking if she had hit him. Xiao Jai turned his head to the other side and replied no. He did not want to fight against an insect woman since she was no match for him, and for this reason, he had left the nest as quickly as possible. Jiang became even more confused upon seeing that he was speaking as if he were stronger than her. He didn't even know why Xiao Jai had such a strange attitude, considering it was supposed that he was a terrifying existence from eternal hell. But Jiang decided to leave children's matters to children since it was better for them to resolve things on their own. He placed his hand on Xiao Jai's shoulder, extended the other toward the box, and with a forced smile asked him to stop thinking about the matter and advised him to eat first. With a depressed expression, Xiao Jai responded with an understood. He began to use his powers, making the bottle caps fly through the air. Little by little all the blood started to come out of the bottles, and Xiao Jai, who had his eyes closed, began to drink it. Once he consumed all the blood, a powerful energy appeared around his body, and several system windows manifested. Now that the level transition had been completed, the system began to extract the abilities. Jiang clenched his fist, began to observe it, and couldn't help but smile. This was a gamble to see if he could obtain a good ability. He was hoping to acquire the Infernal Furnace. Jiang was teleported into his subconscious where a powerful energy began to emerge from his body. He obtained the ability called Divine Body of the Guardian Elephant of legendary quality. It was a special Divine Constitution type ability. The human body was composed of 840 million tiny particles, and each one possessed the strength of a giant elephant. If all the particles awakened, it could compare to a divine elephant capable of stirring seas and rivers, roaring until stars fell, reaching the moon, and devouring the sun in an instant. The red beetle could transform into primordial particles and integrate himself into Jiang's body. Jiang opened his hand, began to observe his palm, and his eyes filled with surprise and confusion since he did not know if the divine body of the guardian elephant was the improved version of the Hell Furnace ability. Jiang's body began to emit the same energy as Xiao Jai's. He clenched his fists and couldn't help but start smiling because now the power in his body was very strong. And if in these days he could produce 2 generations of insects, he would be able to match Jiang Wuxuang's strength. But what was most impressive was that Xiao Jia could also merge with him, not only increasing his strength but also meaning that he would no longer have to fight with Little Nine in the insect nest, something that was simply perfect for the situation. Xiao Jia heard everything, manifested himself, and told his father that he was hungry and wanted to eat some divine or demonic meat. Upon hearing his voice, Jiang came out of his trance, began observing him, and couldn't help but enter a state of alertness and confusion. He didn't know why Xiao Jia had suddenly started speaking like this, to which Xiao Jia responded that he had learned it from Little Nine because he wanted her to accept him as a brother. At the same time, in some remote place in the mountains was the temple of the cult of the ancient sacred god of Jiangnan. Inside, there were several hooded men, standing in line in front of another man who was seated on a throne. The leader asked his subordinates if they had any new information. One of the men responded that Jiang Chen from the Jiangnan War District had learned to use the Celestial Sword and had also developed 4 moves, the last one called Great Dao, which could be of divine level. Another man reported that some matters between Jiang and the Great State Protecting General, Xiao Yuanchen, had been covered up, and not even their people had been able to find the slightest bit of information through soul searching. Moreover, they themselves had died due to the counterattack. The leader stood up, and with a serious expression came to the conclusion that the Great Dreamer was the one who had acted, realizing that this type of secret did not need to be investigated. He gave his men the order to adjust the hunting list of Dazia's geniuses, keeping the top 3 unchanged and placing Jiang Cheng in 4th place. The leader stepped down from the throne and began walking toward the shadows, deciding to raise the reward level for the top 4 on the list. Whoever managed to kill any of them would receive purification from the ancient god and ascend directly to a stellar level of 6 transformations. He reminded everyone that members of the church ranks 2nd through 5th had been killed by Jai Linkyu. He decided it was time to rise up and fight since the church of the ancient god had remained silent for too long. Somewhere in the temple, there was a giant beast with dozens of eyes. The leader approached it and thanked his god for not abandoning them and for granting them a divine opportunity. According to him, now was time to do something for their ancient gods. The entire place was filled with cobwebs, and compared to the place, the leader seemed like a simple fly. He began to gaze at the ground and greeted the Spider Queen, introducing himself as the 7th seat of the Church of the Ancient Gods. The man revealed that this time he had come to talk about an alliance. The Spider Queen extended her sharp leg, and her gaze fixed on the man, letting him know that she did not trust humanity. The man placed his hand over his chest, bowed his head, and explained that they were different from ordinary humans since although they possessed impure human bodies, their souls had already been delivered into the embrace of the ancient gods. They proclaimed themselves as apostles of the ancient gods. The strength of the Spider Queen was among the top 100 across countless races in the abyss, and the man was certain that she had orders to get along with them since after all their objectives were aligned. She got tired of the man and asked him to get to the point since she didn't want to listen to nonsense. The man began to show an evil smile, and his eyes filled with excitement, revealing that the south of the river was empty. He wanted to invite the Spider Queen there when the Prodigies competition began, in order to unleash a horde of beasts, and completely devastate Jiangnan City and Chujiang. The Spider Queen fully emerged. The man extended his hands and mentioned that with this sacrifice, they would summon the arrival of the ancient god. And at that moment, the Spider Queen could make any request she desired. The next day at the Jai mansion, Jai Xuanyu went to Jiang's room and began knocking on the door, asking him to get up. She thought that our boy was still sleeping, but to her surprise, Jiang opened the door and started showing a kind smile. Seeing this, she couldn't help but feel somewhat confused. She began blushing like a tomato and with an angry gaze asked him where he planned to go. Jiang remained calm and with a serene expression asked if she didn't want to go out on a date with him, questioning whether perhaps she wanted to enter his room. Upon hearing this, she got even angrier. She got nervous, turned her back on our boy, and asked him to come with her since her father had something to tell him. Jiang couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised. At the same time, in the training field, the father was lying on a beach lounger, and next to him were several men. Several minutes later, his daughter and Jiang arrived, and upon seeing this, the father became excited. The father was known as the king of lounging around, and Jiang thought that the father truly lived up to his name since he was lying down so early in the morning. The father extended his hand toward some men and explained that they were the prodigies of the city, revealing that in a couple of days they would become his enemies. Upon seeing Jiang, the men couldn't help but feel angry and envious. Jiang began observing the men, and upon noticing their expressions, he couldn't help but feel somewhat confused. The father introduced the first one as Hua Yunfei, someone who possessed the only hidden profession of heroic spirit summoner. And just as he was about to reveal his ability, the daughter approached him and asked him not to reveal everything to their enemies since that was considered betrayal. Hua Yunfei was somewhat confused, and upon seeing that the daughter had intervened, he felt relieved. The father apologized with the excuse that he had just woken up. Jiang began to observe them and noticed that the father did not treat him as a stranger. He still had the Eye of the Void, so there was no need for introductions. The father revealed that there were 8 days left until the Great Summer Ranking competition, and in order for them to reach a higher level, he decided to open a sacred relic of Jilai so they could enter and undergo trials. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to him, and they were all left speechless. The daughter's eyes filled with surprise as she realized that he was going to invest a lot in them. Hua Yunfei's gaze filled with emotion, and he couldn't help but smile since the divine treasure of Jilai was the supreme secret of Daxia. Jiang was somewhat confused upon seeing that the father had summoned him just to tell him this, questioning whether it wasn't planned to use this as bait to make him sell his body. What they were going to explore on this journey was the third divine vault of the Jai, an ancient divine corpse 10,000 jang long. 80% of its interior had already been explored, but even so, it remained extremely dangerous. Under no circumstances should they enter the head of the divine corpse, as it would mean certain death. Xiao Jai manifested upon hearing this and told his father that he was hungry. Jiang couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed and explained to him that repeating the same thing wasn't suitable for his poker face, asking him not to use them anymore, promising that he could take him or not to eat depending on what conditions the king set. The father stood up and asked everyone to follow him, but once he looked back, he saw Jiang standing still. He asked what he was doing and if he didn't want to go. Quickly, Jiang replied that yes, he did want to go. Now that the king hadn't set any conditions, Xiao Jia was going to have food, something that made the little red beetle happy. With a worried expression, Hua Yunfei asked the king why Jiang Chen, an outsider, could also enter the divine treasure. The father, in a calm voice, mentioned that although Jiang was now a stranger, in the future he would be someone very close. He turned around, gave him a thumbs up, winked at our boy, and asked him to protect his daughter in the divine treasure since they both needed to support each other to be a good couple. She began to blush again and said that she did not need him to protect her. Our boy remained silent. While on the other side, Hua Yunfei got angry and started feeling envious of our boy. At the same time, somewhere in the forest where the trees had no leaves, there was a giant coffin, and in front of it stood a man holding a golden staff, who realized that this place was dangerous and asked everyone to move away quickly. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.